Kairi! Welcome back to my channel, Made Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we're going to be doing my April and O.W.L.s, or Magical Readathon, wrap-up. For the O.W.L.s Readathon, I went for the Hogwarts professor career, which means that I had 7 prompts I needed to complete. I needed to complete the Defense Against the Dark Arts prompt, the prompt for the class that I wished to teach, which was Transfiguration, and 5 other prompts of my choice. For the Defense Against the Dark Arts prompt, we had to read a book set at the coast, or at the sea. So for this one, I read The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This book was unfortunately my least favorite of the books that I read for the O.W.L.s. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I may drop it to 2.5 upon further reflection, I'm not sure. But this book is about a boy. Oh, I can't remember his name already. This is not surprising on my channel. The main character, he finds a book written about him, or that has him in it, at the library. And so he kind of goes on a quest to find out what this book is about and, you know, why he's in it. And the setup of the story and the synopsis was really interesting to me, but the actual application of that story was not the best, in my opinion. It was very meandering, and if you are a plot-based reader, this book is definitely not for you. The one thing I will give this book, though, is the writing is absolutely gorgeous. If you've read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, it's her only other book as far as I'm aware. Her writing is really what people quote as enjoying the most in that book, and I can't blame them for it. Her writing is gorgeous and lyrical and magical in a way that almost no one else's is, and I will never argue against that. So that is the one aspect of this book I really did enjoy. And the beginning of it, when you kind of get to explore a more magical, whimsical world that Erin Morgenstern introduces to you, that exploration in the beginning was very fun. But by the end of the story, the different imageries were supposed to be kind of converging in, I'm assuming, a meaningful way. But for me, I was just very confused as to what was happening. And I really had to force myself to finish the last pages of this. So overall, I would say writing is gorgeous, the concept is wonderful, but it was about 200 to 300 pages too long. The next book that I read was for the class that I'm going to teach, which is Transfiguration. So you had to read a book that featured some kind of shape-shifting. And I went with 1,000 Beginnings and Endings. This is an anthology, a collection of short stories put together by Ellen O. and Elise Chapman from, I believe it's 15 authors, including Renee Audier and Julie Kagawa and some pretty big names. And it's all of the authors have an Asian heritage. So its own voices in that regard. And it's these Asian writers rewriting or doing a retelling of myths from their culture. And I love mythology. I love kind of origin stories, and I love hearing the stories that are the basis for a culture. And Asian myths are not told enough. While Greek mythology is wonderful, I really think a lot of people should read more about Asian mythology. And Asian mythology includes a lot of shape-shifting. So I wasn't 100% sure there'd be shape-shifting in here, but I ended up guessing correctly. There was a lot of it. Also, the tabs on the side, we all know I'm a tabber. Let's see if you can see, but the pink tabs all represent food instances where food was described. And as you can tell from how many tabs are in here, the food descriptions in Asian culture are phenomenal. It holds a lot of significance for the mythology and modern Asian culture. So I thoroughly enjoyed this collection. As with all collections, there were 1 or 2 stories that didn't really hit home for me, but the majority of them were beautifully written, and I really enjoyed them. So I highly recommend reading this short story collection if you are interested in Asian culture. I know there's an Asian readathon coming up in May, so if you need a prompt, this one. I really recommend this one. I ended up giving this, I think it was 4 or 4.5 stars. Now, the next 5 prompts I was able to pick because of the Hogwarts professor career. So I picked Ancient Runes as my next one, so you had to read a book with a heart on the cover. And for this one, I read Difficult Women by Roxane Gay. Oh, that is just not clean. Sorry about that, guys. You know those matte covers, they're beautiful, but then you touch them with your dirty little paws and they don't look as good anymore. Sorry about that, guys. I don't really know how I feel about this one. I think this, you know what, this might be my lowest rated one, below the Starless Sea, actually. Because part of this is my fault, because I went into this thinking it was going to be a collection of stories of real people's lives, just like her Not That Bad collection was. But it's not actually. It's stories created by Roxane Gay. And I understand that her goal was to write stories about difficult women, women who have difficult lives or aren't necessarily good people or definitely aren't good people, and just to share that those lives exist and are still important and those stories need to be told. So in that vein, I didn't enjoy almost any individual story in here. You can see I've only got maybe like 3 tabs here, 4 tabs, and I didn't enjoy any individual story or character, and I'm not sure you're supposed to. But what I did enjoy is the overall feeling after I read the book. After I read the book, I felt like I was privy to the lives of women who don't have good lives. And I felt like it was kind of my duty in a way to be aware that women do live these kinds of lives. And I did recognize myself in some of these unlikable characters. So, you know, I think, would I recommend this book? Not necessarily, because the reading process wasn't necessarily enjoyable for me. But the overall feeling I have after was that I'm glad that I read it. So it's kind of a hard one to describe. I don't know if I'd recommend it or not, but if that kind of theme sounds good to you, you could definitely pick this up. I think I ended up giving this 2 stars. Pretty sure it was 2 stars. The next prompt that I picked was arithmancy, and for that one, you're supposed to read something outside of your normal genre. And for me, I almost never pick up contemporary. It's just not my thing. But for this one, I picked up a man called O.W.L.s. I should know how to say his name because I listened to the damn audiobook. This book by Frederick Bachman. Bachman? If you've watched any of my other videos, you know I love his writing. It's kind of the exception to the rule for me with contemporary, and this one was no different. I gave this 5 stars. I have talked about it in another video, which I can link up below, or link up above and down below. But when I was listening to the audiobook of this, I was like crying riding my bicycle home. And a lot of people were like, what is this bitch okay? Like, they were not trying to be near me, and I don't blame them. But it was such a touching, beautiful, hilarious story. So our main character is like a old, grumpy man who complains about everything and doesn't seem to take much joy from the world. And you kind of follow from his perspective how he sees things. And by the end of the book, it's just, oh my gosh, he's such a cinnamon bun. The characters that he interacts with are just so well developed, and their interactions together are just so naturally produced that I feel like this could have been from someone's real life. Frederick Bachman has a way of writing characters that wouldn't necessarily be well-loved characters normally, in a way that makes you feel like you connect to them. And this book was no different. So I ended up giving this 5 stars. I loved it so much, and I would recommend it to anyone. The next prompt that I chose was Care of Magical Creatures. So you had to read a book with a beak on the cover. And for that one, I chose Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas, or technically, I guess, House of Earth and Blood, but we all know we're going to be calling it Crescent City in this video. If you haven't seen this, I don't know where you've been, but it's one of the most hyped books on BookTube so far this year. I have an individual review linked that I did before, so I'll link it above and below. So I won't go too deep into my thoughts here, but I have an interesting history with Sarah J. Maas. I don't love her, I don't hate her, I'm kind of in the middle. I've really enjoyed some of her books, and other books I'm like, yeah, no. So I didn't really know what to expect going to this one. Well, I knew what to expect from her writing, but I didn't know what the outcome would be. And I was pleasantly surprised. I tabbed the crap out of it, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. I just loved the female friendship in here, and the character development was very well done, and I really liked her setup of the world for the future stories that she's clearly going to tell in this world, so I liked the way she set up for that in this installment. And while there were parts of it that weren't very strong, like the murder mystery aspect of this book was not its strong point, the other aspects of this book were strong enough that I thoroughly enjoyed reading it, and I cried multiple times. So if you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts, please check out the other video that I did. Okay, we have 2 more left. The next one I picked was Muggle Studies. So you have to read a book from the perspective of a Muggle or a contemporary. And for that one, I chose Tomo-chan wa Ononoko. And this is a Japanese manga. I live in Japan, so I'm working on developing my reading skills in Japanese. I can speak it quite well, but I want to make my reading skills match. So eventually, as I've mentioned before in my channel, I want to level up to novels, but for now, I'm working on reading manga in Japanese. So this was the one I did this month, and it's a contemporary, like, romantic comedy story about this girl, Tomo-chan, and this is her childhood best friend, Jun, and he doesn't really see her as a girl in the beginning, and so she confesses to him in, like, the first couple pages and says, "I love you," and he's like, "Oh, shucks, I love you too, best friend." So she's friend-zoned, and then this story is about the development of their relationship in their high school days. And I've shown this in another video too, but it's kind of slapstick humor, as you can see. So Tomo-chan and Jun both do martial arts, so there's some really funny physical humor in this as well. And I laughed out loud many times reading this. The only thing that kept this from being 5 stars for me is it's a like a 4-panel style manga. And while these have existed for a very long time, they're kind of segmented, so each 4-panel set tends to tell one story. They can be connected over multiple sets, but typically it's like a 4-panel mini story, and then they tell one big story together. And because my reading level isn't native, sometimes those jump cuts were really confusing for me, and I'm like, wait, what? Where are we? What? How does this joke connect to the previous, 4-panel page? So that was a little, it kind of took me out of the story, so that was a little hard for me. But overall, the story itself and the characters are really, really well done. So if you, I don't know if this is translated. So I'll go ahead and leave a link in my description down below if I can find the translated version of this, if there is one. But I would definitely recommend it. It's really funny. So I would say, I think I gave this 4 stars. The last prompt that I chose was charms. So you had to read a book with a mostly white cover. And for that one, I chose Arcanum Unbounded by Brandon Sanderson. I love Brandon Sanderson, and I've read all of his Cosmere works up to this point. Rhythm of War this year. Yes! But besides that, I've read all of his Cosmere works, so it was finally time to read his short story collection. And I would recommend waiting until you've read all of his works to read the full collection. There are selective stories in here that you can read after completing different stories of his, but if you want to read the whole collection, I really suggest waiting because there's spoilers all over this thing. But while I can't go into the depth of many stories because it's spoilery, it mentions characters that you might not have read about yet. I really enjoyed the Cosmere building tidbits we got here. So if you're not aware, the Cosmere is Brandon Sanderson's universe. And in that universe, he has many different worlds, multiple worlds. And until this point, they've kind of existed in their own solar system, basically, for lack of a better word. And in this book, we kind of get an overview of each system and the magic system that exists there and how that came to be. And I'm such a sucker, again, from 1,000 Beginnings and Endings, mythology, origin stories. I love it. So I really enjoyed all those little tidbits in this book. So I ended up giving it 4 stars. Some of the stories really pulled me in and gave me extra information that I didn't really realize I needed until I learned it. But some of the other ones just didn't pull me in as much. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. Really enjoyed it. If you've read the rest of his Cosmere works, I highly recommend picking this up. That concludes my O.W.L.s Readathon April wrap-up. So in total, I read... how many? 8 books. I read 8 books in the end, and I'm quite happy with that, actually. I think that a lot of these books were chunkers, and one of them wasn't in my native language, so it took me a little bit longer to read. So I'm pretty happy with those 8 books, and that means that I passed my O.W.L.s. Yay! So that means I'll be taking on the Newts in the summertime. I believe it's summer. So we'll see if I can pass my Newts. But this was my first readathon ever, and I had a really wonderful experience. So go ahead and leave comments down below. What career did you pass? What books did you read? Have you read any of these? Just comment down below. Let me know what's up. And I'll be back with another video soon. But for now, I'm gonna head out. Jane!